It's February 1978, and Britain's roads are still caked in salt and sludge. Family saloons rattle over frozen tarmac, heaters wheeze like asthmatic dogs, and every trip to the shops feels like an unfair battle with nature. Above our heads, America has lobbed the world's first GPS satellite into orbit, a gadget no driver yet understands, but one that will one day nag every missed turning. For now, navigation still means glovebox maps, your dad's memory, and blazing rows at crossroads. On the forecourts, change is accelerating. 4 saloons stand waiting, each with its own trick to tempt families into showrooms. Some say one arrived in Pininfarina's best, but kept a biscuit tin under its bonnet. Another went full chrome and called it class. A third was so methodical it made spreadsheets look spontaneous. And the last one? It was light, nimble, and more fun than it had any right to be. All we know is they're the Peugeot 305, the Ford Granada, the Opel Rekord, and the Mazda 323. This is February 1978, and this is Four Wheels and Fuel. Peugeot 305. By the late 70s, Peugeot's small saloons were due for a shake-up. The 204 from 1965 had been clever but tiny, and the 304 of 1969 stretched things just enough to keep families happy. By 1977, though, rivals like the Golf and Escort were eating Peugeot's lunch, and the 305 arrived as their answer, bigger, sharper, and styled by Pininfarina. It looked like a Frenchman's idea of German respectability. Straight lines, upright stance, and just enough chrome to reassure buyers that this wasn't too cheap. At the front sat a pair of rectangular headlights, angled just enough to look permanently unimpressed, like a teacher waiting for you to finish your excuse. A thin chrome strip ran down the length of the bumper as though Pininfarina had ruled a line and decided to leave it there. Pop the bonnet and you'd find a neat transverse 4-cylinder, offered in 1.3, 1.5 and 1.6 litre form. The 1.5 was the sweet spot, 75 horsepower, light on its feet and happy to sit at 70 all day. Sitting proudly on top of the carburettor was a big round air filter housing that looked less like engineering and more like a biscuit tin shoved in by mistake. Very Peugeot. Simple, practical, and just a little absurd. Inside, the 305 felt more grown up than its badge suggested. The dashboard was symmetrical, the seats firm but supportive, and the gear lever had a throw so long you could almost write a postcard mid-shift. An ashtray and seat-back pockets for your magazines and cigarettes, because nothing said executive in 1977 like chain smoking on the way to the office instead of looking like a peasant on the bus. On the road, though, the 305 came together. Light steering, well-judged suspension, and a composure that embarrassed some rivals. It wasn't sporty, but it made commuting feel just that little bit less like punishment. The 305 wasn't the fastest or flashiest saloon in 1978, but it was the most complete Peugeot had built in years. Mature, practical, and just odd enough to make you smile when you lifted the bonnet. French restraint with Italian tailoring. The grown-up small saloon.
Deep in the pine forests of Europe lie some of the most grueling tests ever devised by man. Chambers that sear at 22 degrees above boiling point and can freeze to -40. Machines that shake, pull and stretch 200 times a second. All these tests of endurance were built by Ford to test the Ford Granada. A car engineered to be durable and reliable. A car engineered to be quiet and comfortable. A car with all-round independent suspension. A car engineered to be sure-footed and to cope with the worst moods of nature. The luxurious new 1980 Granada puts the emphasis on engineering. Take one for a test drive.
Ford Granada, Mark II. The first Granada of 1972 had given Ford's European range a proper flagship. A big, brash saloon that felt just as at home in Essex as it did in Cologne. By 1977, though, the formula needed updating. Out went the curves and chrome of the Mark I. In came the sharper, more modern Mark II. It was Ford's way of saying, yes, we've been to Detroit, but we still remember the Autobahn. The styling was clean and square, with a vast plastic grille at the front and slabby sides that made rival saloons look apologetic. At some angles, it was sleek. At others, it looked like a fridge freezer with hubcaps. Either way, it had presence. And for Ford's executive buyers, that was half the job done. Lift the bonnet and you were confronted with serious acreage. Engines ranged from the sensible 2-litre 4 up to the 2.3 and 2.8 V6s, the latter giving 135 horsepower and a healthy growl. Perched on top of that 2-litre was a circular air filter housing as wide and flat as an LP record, except this one only played one track, an annoying hum every time you floored it. There was so much room in the engine bay, you could practically host a picnic between oil changes. Inside, the Granada went full lounge. Deep velour seats swallowed you whole. Fake wood convinced you from a distance. And the gear lever moved with all the precision of stirring soup. The dashboard bristled with switches and warning lights, the sort of kit that looked impressive until you tried to remember which button did the rear demister. On the motorway, though, the Granada earned its keep. Smooth, quiet, and unbothered by speed, it turned long hauls into easy cruisers. Cornering was more a suggestion than a skill, but that wasn't the point. This was about space, comfort, and arriving fresher than you left. The Mark II might not have been thrilling, but it nailed what Ford's execs wanted: presence, refinement, and a sense of arriving in something bigger than yourself. American swagger, European sense, and a boot the size of a bedsit.
Seine Gestalt prägte der Wind. Seine Fahrkultur, die moderne Technologie. Seine Sicherheit, die Forschung. Der neue Opel Rekord. Der neue Opel Rekord. Dynamische Technik im Windprofil.
Opel Rekord E. The Rekord name had been part of Opel's story since 1953, a dependable line of saloons and estates that defined German middle-class motoring. By the late 70s, the E generation arrived to replace the D, sharpening up the lines but keeping the same sensible formula: space, solidity, and no surprises. If you wanted fireworks, you bought something else. If you wanted your car to just work, you bought a Rekord. From the outside, it was pure Opel restraint. Straight edges, flat panels, and proportions that made it look substantial without ever straying into Granada-style bulk. It was a car designed with a ruler rather than a brush, and it showed. That, of course, was precisely the point. Lift the bonnet and you got exactly what you'd expect from Rüsselsheim. Order. The 1.7 and 2-litre 4s were the bread and butter, the 2-litre delivering 90 horsepower with unflappable ease. Nothing exotic, nothing fragile, just built to outlast its first 3 owners. The real quirk was the bay itself. Laid out so straight and symmetrical, it looked more like a geometry exercise than an engine compartment. Inside, the Rekord continued the same theme. The seats were firm, the dash a monument to logic, and the gear lever precise, if not exactly inspiring. Visibility was excellent, and every control fell naturally to hand. It was a car you could drive without ever cracking the manual, because everything was exactly where you expected it to be. On the road, the Rekord was steady rather than exciting. The ride was firm but comfortable, the handling predictable, and the whole car felt sturdier than its price suggested. It didn't want to be hustled, but it didn't complain if you tried. The Rekord E was never about thrills. It was about competence. A car that did its job so thoroughly, you almost forgot it was there. Not a head-turner, but the kind of car that would still start every morning 20 years later, long after the neighbours' Alphas had dissolved into flakes.
This is the Mazda 323. This is the way to go. It's got to be the best looking, best value hatchback ever seen. Mazda's got to be the way to go. Mazda 323.
Mazda 323. Mazda's family hatchbacks had been evolving since the 1960s, familiar models. But by 1977, the 323 arrived as a clean sheet, we think. While rivals were growing heavier and fussier, Mazda went compact, sharp, and simple. It was Japan's quiet revolution in Europe. Proof that you didn't need flash or bulk to build a proper family car. From the outside, the 323 was tidy and unpretentious. Short overhangs, upright cabin, and just enough chrome to stop it looking austere. It wasn't designed to win beauty contests. It was designed to look right in a suburban driveway. And it did. Flip the catch, and you found Japanese packaging at its most ruthless. The 1.3-litre 4 sat neatly in the middle, delivering 68 horsepower. That doesn't sound much, but with barely 800 kilos to push, it felt brisk enough for everyday driving. The real curiosity was the packaging. The radiator pressed flat against the front panel. The fan squeezed in like an afterthought, and every component tucked millimetre tight. It looked less like an engine bay and more like someone had scaled up a transistor radio to full size. Inside, the 323 proved Mazda knew ergonomics better than most Europeans. The dashboard was clean and logical. The gear lever snicked through its gates with the precision of a well-oiled typewriter, and visibility was excellent all round. Even the mirrors mounted on the doors felt modern in 1978, a small detail that made the car seem ahead of the curve. On the move, the 323 surprised even skeptics. Light steering, nimble handling, and suspension tuned just firmly enough to make B-roads fun without punishing the passengers. It wasn't a sports car, but it had an honesty to the way it drove. Lively, without trying to be something it wasn't. The 323 wasn't flashy, but it was clever. Tight build quality, reliability baked in, and a driving experience that proved small didn't have to mean cheap. It was the start of Mazda's long game in Europe, and it worked. That was February 1978. 4 saloons with 4 philosophies. Peugeot's restraint, Ford's comfort, Opel's order, Mazda's precision. Each one made the commute less dull in its own way. 47 years later, they remind us that sensible doesn't have to mean soulless. Did your parents drive one of these? Or do you still spot them at classic shows? Share your stories below. They make their history come alive. And if you haven't already, hit like and subscribe. It keeps 4 wheels and fuel rolling. Next time, March 1978 brings politics in crisis, football glory rising, and 4 saloons fighting for families' attention. A stubborn Brit, a dependable Japanese, a precise German, and an eager Italian. Until then, keep your tank full, your heater working, and your nostalgia in top gear.